Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome. Welcome. I love it. Brian in Twitch chat said, here we go. And every time somebody says that, I have this vision of the Joker from Batman. Here we go. I love it. You know what? I'm not even gonna do this anymore. Like, I'm just gonna bring Jon in immediately. Like, I know, right? Like, we're just skipping the whole like formality of stuff. We're just gonna like jump right into it. Jon, happy freaking Thursday to you, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great because it's pretty much Friday for me. I'm about to be off this. Never going to see me again.
You got PTO rolling up in here. Oh, you got permanent PTO. Is that what's going on? You're like, I am done, guys. I am done.
No, permanent PTO is after re-exit. So if anybody's out there listening,
I love
Send your boy a couple mil.
Well, thank you all for tuning in for another beautiful Thursday afternoon Sec Data Ops cast with my good friend, my good buddy, my compatriot in crime, Jonathan Rao. We got an awesome recap. Jon and I, Jon more than me, I just flew up for a day, spent a day at Inforce at AWS. This has been a week of conferences. We had CribbleCon this week. There was .conf for Splunk this week. Jon and I will get into all that, but first, Jon, we gotta do what we always do. We gotta take care of some rules, buddy. I know you love rules.
No rules for me, sir. It's an Air Force thing.
Be good. So first and foremost, I want to give a huge shout out to my mods. We do have mods in chat. They do grab all the questions that you got in chat. Do give a huge shout out to our mods. Do make a point that if you are timed out or banned, you do reach out to a mod. They're the ones who kind of enforce that. And so there's a great opportunity to hit that exclamation point Discord and get access to our Discord. We do welcome questions at any point in time. This is vastly different. If this is your first time in a cyber and security chat, we do like to have questions kind of come throughout the entirety of the stream. We can see people have already started to drop questions in chat. So as we kind of like talk through stuff, if you got things that you hear Jon and I talk about, especially as we're going through some of these recaps of things that we've seen at these conferences, please make sure that you ask those in chat as much as possible. Neal, is your mic low or is Jon's mic too loud? Listen, we struggle with Jon's mic pretty regularly. Like he
sucks.
He's either really loud because he's a loud guy. Chat, I don't know if you realize, but Jon's just a loud mouth in general. Okay.
Can't confirm. I mean, I am a New Yorker.
We are streaming live across LinkedIn, Twitch, YouTube, X, as well as Instagram. Jon, you are making your Instagram debut on the Cyber and Security Instagram channel as well. So we are catching a lot.
I never last very long on IG. I always say something too spicy.
I think you've got it wrong. You can say the spicy stuff on IG. You can't say the spicy stuff on LinkedIn. There's a difference there between the two of those.
I don't know. I get away with a little bit more spicier stuff on LinkedIn, to be honest. Like,
you do. It's amazing.
Like taxation is theft.
It is amazing.
And the Fed.
How, you never catch any flack for some of this stuff that you say on LinkedIn.
I have privately. I mean, there's some things that we won't rehash, but that I've said that, I've had people threaten me in the DMs. I'm like, yo, bro, come find me.
No, have you really?
Yeah. They're like, I'm going to find your investors. I'm going to find your CEO. And I'm like, cool, I'll trade you their address for yours.
Oh, geez. Okay, so this is...
So come give you a hug.
This is
we're going to get that edited out.
Is always up our
marketing's like, damn it, already. This is why you got to catch these live.
That's right.
I had somebody come to me at Reinforce say that I'm not unfettered enough.
Oh.
And I was like, yo, bro, insert a couple mil.
No, it is best to catch them live. It's always best to catch them live.
Yeah, they're still saying I'm too loud. I'm on a Windows laptop, not on the stupid Mac laptop, so this thing's probably...
Man, we gotta...
Yeah.
We gotta
I thought I was on the Windows laptop last week and we had this thing sorted out, but I don't know. I need to get with you and Jeremy.
There we go. We turned Jon down just a little bit. We turned him all the way down. Let me know if that's
oh God,
good enough.
Yeah. I was turned all the way down before and it was too low.
Yeah.
Oh well. Who knows?
The next step is just mute you. We're just gonna bring somebody else in to ad lib over top of of you. They can't hear you anyway.
Just going to be like an angry face here as a stand-in. But let's get to it before,
let's get to
no more complaining about the sound.
That's right. That's right. Turn the volume up and then down, and then up and then down and then up and then down. All right. So Reinforce, AWS's security event. We both had different roles there. You were manning the booth. I think I was. I got invited to. I don't know if I'm supposed to say it. I actually got told I wasn't supposed to put anything on social media about it. I was supposed to kind of keep it all hush hush. Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm wondering if those are AWS helicopters that I'm hearing above me with ninjas on the roof.
Now you're gonna get canceled for it. I don't know. Neal went to a very important event that was awesome for Neal, and I also met Neal in person for the first time, which is also very cool.
This is the first time that we met each other in person, isn't it?
Yeah. Which didn't feel like it. Maybe that's just because we're both weird, or because we have a good rapport as it is, but maybe a little bit of both. But it was great to meet you, buddy.
What was the most anticipated part of meeting me in real life?
I don't know. I mean, it's always hard to gauge how like tall somebody is, or like if their voice sounds the same in real life. I don't know why. It's just like, I wonder like what they actually look like, because for some reason a lot of people look different, like on film. Not saying you do or not. Like I've seen you without a hat, so it wasn't like I was like, oh my god, where's your beautiful mullet at, bro?
That's right. Where's my mullet?
But I don't know. I mean, like we have pretty good rapport and candor when we speak. Obviously, we get a little spicier off stream.
Yes.
So it was just kind of like old hat, but I think that's indicative of like a good organization, which,
Well,
I feel
I also think
have good coworkers.
I was gonna say, you and I also military backgrounds, right? Military backgrounds, and so it's real easy for two military people to just kind of like come together and be like, oh yeah, and just like, because you've got that built-in camaraderie that I would say from that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's funny. Like, I usually don't get along with a lot of other veterans, mostly like the high school varsity back in the day. You should have seen me types, you know what I'm saying? Like, who make it their central personality. I'm like, bro, it's an all volunteer force. I don't care if you're some Delta SEAL sniper, you volunteered for that. I don't care if you're a cook, an admin clerk, some, REMF type person. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, chill. Nobody put a gun to your head. Like, you aren't winning accolades, and we weren't really fighting enemies that, or we're world beaters. Like, this isn't Carthage v. Rome, and we're crossing the Alps on elephants. Like, this is, it's a little bit different. I mean, but that's just me though. But you are right that it is a bit easier. Than I guess like just off the street. But we're also both introverted, so it's just like, oh hey.
What's it like being an introvert at a conference? Now, listen, for those who don't know, Reinforce is not as big as a Black Hat or DEF CON. If you've been to Black Hat or DEF CON, you're like, it's a vastly different scale. But what's it like to be an introvert? And keep in mind, you were on the floor talking to customers on a day-to-day basis. What was that like for you?
We were right there. Yeah, I mean, Dave says I'm not a very good introvert. Dave's our AE. I mean, he might as well. Dave has like 20 roles really with us. He's another coworker, another person I got to meet in person for the first time, and we got to experience all the worst Philly had to offer. Philly's just so bad that like other people we would tell, they're like, yeah, that's about right. And it's not like I have never been to Philly, but I haven't been to Philly since 2020, I think. And let's
talk about that, because like while I saw some bad stuff while I was there, it sounded like you guys had seen something a little weird happen.
We saw a guy, unfortunately, look, drug addiction is bad. Yeah. I don't want to get into like the philosophical thing before it, but all the people that we saw used to be normal people, I would assume. I mean, they probably had a rough upbringing, but they came in just like we all did, right? Screaming, or maybe a little silent. We had to get held upside down. The doctor had to hit us or whatnot. But like, it's another human. And you've seen it, I've seen it, military, but also grown up in rough neighborhoods, like kind of the worst humanity's had to offer. So I have a certain empathy for people, but seeing folks like doing the dirt snow angel on the street, overdosing, seeing people get attacked, seeing people having things taken from them, seeing, drug addicted folks like with babies, in the stroller and the baby's not looking good. We saw some guy digging in his legs for like a good vein that wasn't jacked up. And then we saw him the next day too, on the way to dinner. I guess having a successful vein expedition. So it was the depressing part about it was just that it was kind of background, right? Like it got so bad there that we were in the nicest part of town, or at least as nice as it gets in Philly, in Center City, like at a really nice restaurant for the first night before you'd gotten there. And it was like right outside, people overdosing, people freaking out, and nobody cared. Cops didn't care. Other passerbys didn't care. And it's like, I guess when you see it, you get desensitized to it. But that, you get desensitized to the lowest amongst us, and you get desensitized to regular people. Then you get desensitized to your family. Like, I've seen it happen like that. So, I mean, it was sad. I didn't like seeing it. It wasn't enjoyable. There was funny moments. Sure. We saw some, amusing things, but we also saw a lot of horrible things and some just gross things that I don't want to see. I saw a lot of rear and naked ass.
Well, on that, but on that note, I
to go to your first question though, right? Like, actually, wait, no. What did you think? Because you didn't walk around as much, but you still walked around. Like,
I didn't.
And what was your impression?
This was my first time in Philly. Philly. And so I was astounded at the architecture.
Yes.
And then I saw everything else, and I was disappointed. I think that was the best way to put it. I was like, it was a gorgeous, like the architecture. I'd never seen anything as beautiful as that in my entire life. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Especially where we're at with the Expo Center.
Yeah, they had picked a really, really good location for this. It was pretty awesome. Speaking of the location, let's dive into it. You watched the keynote, right?
No, actually, I was on booth detail, but I caught a part of it on video. I want to answer your first question though, like being an introvert at a conference, a convention, Dave says I'm not a good introvert because like I'm decently charismatic, right? It's not like I'm antisocial. I just prefer not to, like going out, partying, live music, all that stuff. Like that's never been my thing. I'd rather just, keep to myself. I always thought of myself as somebody born in the right time, or the wrong time rather, not born in the right time. But then again, I ask now that, I don't want to say I'm an expert in history, but I know a ton of history. And it's like, is any time a right time, or is any time the wrong time? It's like, if it isn't seeing shenanigans in Philly, it's getting chased by freaking Mongols or Huns or Magyars or, some lord, or, I'm like on the wrong side of a revolution. Right. So it's exhausting for me. I even told you like the first time I come on the stream, anytime I'm on a guest on somebody's podcast, like I either have to like hide my anxiety behind a lot of like levity and humor and crude humor, or I don't know, I gotta like get a beer or a coffee or like chew on something or like hold something, right? Because it's not that I get nervous or like anxious or I'm like gonna have a panic attack, but I don't know, I just don't like it. It's uncomfortable. I feel like everybody's staring at me. I don't really like it. With a convention where you're presenting, it's a little easier, right? For me, and I don't know if it is for you, right? Because I don't want to speak for you on the kind of social anxiety spectrum, like if it's I do feel it or I don't feel it, because you're an introvert as well. But as long as I have a job to do, so like being at the booth and demoing the product and seeing people from AWS who remembered me. I ran into a guy who interviewed me at AWS.
Nice.
I ran into folks that I met at Blackfoot, which is the building where security's at in Seattle.
Didn't you also say that you ran into people that you hired while you were there that were still there now that you've left?
Nobody I hired at AWS, but somebody I recommended to go to AWS that we worked together as contractors. And it was great seeing him as well. I don't want to, Ravi, if you happen to be listening, but Yeah, and the funny thing was I was a PM. I was just I was even more of a dummy at NBC when I met him, and he taught me a lot about Terraform and how to write them properly. He's like, "Oh, brother, why do you have everything in the same template? That's not how you do it. Don't just run apply." And I'm like, "Oh, whoops, my bad." But it was great. And then also meeting, customers, prospects, partners, folks on the product teams, other vendors. Even though I didn't get one number I wanted to get, but it was, I had enough to distract me to put
who
it
are we
in the
blaming
background.
for that, Dave or Mike?
Nobody. Dave was like, "You're doing a good job." And then somebody really ran up on me. And then when I was trying to do it one more time, somebody ran up on me. And also, I was like, I want to keep it professional. Like, I don't want to call attention to myself. And I was like, you know what? She got lucky. You don't want to deal with this.
I'm like,
but how do you feel, bro?
No, I'm like you, right? So it's super hard to, as an introvert, to go to a conference. And twice as hard when you have to work a booth like you did, right? I don't envy you for having to work a booth like you did. For me, I go back to my days as a SANS instructor, right? And it was super hard for people to realize, oh my God, Neal, you're an introvert. How could you possibly be an instructor for SANS? Like, you guys stand in front of rooms full of 75 and 80 people all the time. And for me, maybe it's latent trauma from when I was a kid. I have no idea. But I found this switch in my head that when I had to be on, when I had to have that outside persona for SANS, I just kind of turned it on, and I was an outside Neal. And I just tried not to think about anything, and I just tried to do the talking that I needed to do and present where I needed to present. But I'll tell you, okay, here we go. Cyber secrets for those for cyber insecurity alums, you'll recognize cyber secrets. I'll let you in, John. We'll tell this story, and then we'll bounce over to the recap. Right? I still get nervous. I was in this room, and I'll talk about this after we, later on in the show. I was in this room full of CISOs, and we were talking about a topic, and I could sit here and I could talk to you and I could talk to chat, and I could sit on the stream for 2 hours and not have I can have a pretty confident voice, right? I get in this room full of CISOs, and we're talking about Gen AI, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I get to the end of my statement, and it was probably 30 seconds worth of saying something, and my voice started to crack. And I was like, oh God, I'm actually pretty nervous about what I'm about to say. And so I even still get nervous when I don't hit that switch, that Neal switch that says okay, this is outside Neal voice, not introvert Neal voice when it comes to speaking. So I feel you.
Yeah, I do have to say for me, it's even worse being an attendee, walking the floor at RSA, especially as a CISO, everybody's looking for that title, right? And on the RSA badges, they're a lot bigger. Yeah. Not the company name, but your title and your name are very big. And then, you'll have AEs and SDRs step out on your path and be like, oh, hey, you look like you want to talk about something. I'm like, no, brother, sister, I'd rather talk about absolutely nothing with you. Nothing against you, but I'm really scared right now, and I want my mommy.
Yeah, that's right. All right, let's talk about recap. So Chris Betts gave the keynote. You saw clippets of it. What were kind of some of your takeaways and thoughts from Chris's keynote?
Yeah, I mean, Reinforce compared to some of the major summits, and obviously reInvent is obviously more laid back and it's very focused at security. The big trend this year, obviously everywhere, has been AI, whether it's Gen AI, whether it's NLQ now, right? NLP, natural language processing, is gone. It's natural language querying, which is funny given our our old version of the product of where we work, but we won't talk about that. It was very cool seeing the query logo very big, because we have a very big logo, kind of front and center. We were officially announced the Security League partnerships. That happened quietly during April, when you guys were at the offsite, and I couldn't make it out there for other personal reasons. And now it was kind of official, and then we launched some new stuff to go along with that. But there was a lot of stress on that, getting access to data using AI. They had a ton of announcements around SageMaker, around Amazon Q, which is the built-in kind of chat body, ChatGPT-like interface inside of the console. And I think it's been there for about a year now. So if you've been in the AWS console really any time in the last year in the commercial region, I'm not sure about GovCloud, you'd have seen it. And then, as far as other notable announcements, I think the one that they mentioned specifically was S3 malware protection for guard duty.
I was going to say, you and I had a bet going into this one as to what
had a bet, yes, about we figured it would be guard duty for like Bedrock or guard duty for Amazon Q, where it would be like some prompt security thing, and you could, have guardrail from Bedrock guardrail. So Amazon Bedrock is a Gen AI PaaS, platform as a service, so you could use models, you could fine-tune models, you could train your own, you could import large language foundational models or base models, whatever you want to call them. You can invoke chat, search, generative imagery, videos, and then you have guardrails, and guardrails are, kind of what they sound like. It's like parameters that you could set, like, hey, somebody asks about this, if they talk about this topic, which funnily enough, the Gen AI guardrails use Gen AI to discern if, a certain topic or somebody's trying to ask.
Destroy the stones.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I was expecting something like that. They came out with the S3 protection like 7 years too late, I feel like, because that was like a big part of like early AWS cloud data security. Like you could put anything in a bucket. Customers upload stuff to buckets, you have Box, you have all of these other applications. So like, we need to scan this. And, people have been like trying to run ClamAV inside of Lambda and ECS and use SQS queues to do that. So they pushed that out, which was pretty cool. We got the shout out, and then just some other notable announcements for me. And, I'd like your take as well, just kind of like being outside, like very, very early observer. SecLake is in GovCloud now. So I think that's awesome. It's not like the government and other agencies and NGAs don't have their own issues in the public sector with security data, obviously. CloudTrail Lake and CloudWatch Log Insights have NLQ now, natural language querying. So CloudTrail Lake actually predates Security Lake by a couple months, which is very confusing, and essentially allows you to, long-term retain and live search using SQL on CloudTrail data. So if you're like a legacy user of that, and then CloudWatch has Log Insights that, we know of that we use for, WAF and other things inside of CloudWatch, which could be straight up unstructured streaming data. So if you have app logs, observability stuff, I think that's pretty cool because it's not the hardest pipe query language to learn, but it's got its nuances for sure. IAM Access Analyzer, which is a sleeper favorite service of mine. They have a way now that public resources and critical resources, but I'm not sure if that's tag based or how it discerns what's critical. They could tell you if there's an identity attack path into it. So let's say you partner that with like inspector data, and then you use SecLake for signaling. Like now you could like kind of get to that risk-based vulnerability management access thing where it's like, okay, I have all these instances. Let me prioritize my jacked up network, jacked up vuln software composition, jacked up identity things, which I think is pretty cool. AWS App Fabric, which is a connector into SaaS tools like Workspace and Entra ID. They have a connector now that I think you're going to be interested in, Neal, for Jump Cloud. They came out with that before, and App Fabric also has an integration with Amazon Security Lake, but I don't think it's on OCSF v1.2. So I have a feeling that I might have another project coming up to get that fixed up. Data Firehose, which is my favorite service in AWS, or at least in my top 5, which is exactly what it sounds like. You said it's just a bunch of data. It integrates a secrets manager now. So if you have API keys, client secret tokens, heck tokens for like Splunk, Snowflake, Datadog, whatever, instead of like putting them inside of the Firehose configuration, and let's say some attacker got access to your environment and had list delivery streams permissions and actually thought to use those. I'm sure there's a novel attack 0 day waiting to happen. They could list those and actually spill out, partial or full secrets depending on what they were, right? If they had access to, the resources. So now you could hide those. And then the last one is API Gateway, which is exactly what it sounds like, a managed service for an API gateway, your methods, your routes, your swaggers, your, open API specs. It integrates with verified access, and verified access is a policy as code service that uses the Cedar language, as in cedar is in the tree.
Not cider,
kind of like
folks who are not guys who are thinking cider.
Right. Doesn't use cider notation. It uses a cedar-like policy as code for OIDC connection. So if you're trying to like build just fully managed like a startup or just a side project, I think that's really cool to add some authorization on top of it. And then Snowflake had some releases, Databricks Summit, CribbleCon.conf. I don't want to move to those just yet. What were some of your notable takeaways, walking the floor, talking to folks, like your brief experience, and also like kind of before and after the event now for you?
Yeah, it was definitely smaller than I expected it to be, but I was glad to see a lot of the security, one of the things that I'm glad that AWS did was they broke out Reinforce and Reinvent, right? I'm glad that they made a security-focused part of the AWS kind of like business model, because I think to your point about, malware protection for S3 buckets being 7 years too late, right? I mean, there has been this like long-standing, what do we do about security in the cloud, just as a business model that I think, kind of beget that like AWS needed to have a dedicated security conference that allowed vendors and people and practitioners and business leaders to come together to talk specifically about securing the cloud. And as AWS is one of the biggest and most prime examples of one out there, right? I mean, I think it made sense for them to do that. So I was glad to see that focus specifically around AWS and a lot of the cloud security. So it's stuff that I talked to a ton of people about. Like I love it and I hate it, John. I love it and I hate it, but it's the Gen AI stuff. It's Gen AI everywhere, and my struggle, and you and I share this, I think, right, is that there's the marketers out there, and I've shared this on cyber and security just fundamentally in the past, right? The marketers continue to shove it down our throats, but have literally no idea, none whatsoever, what it does, how it works, how to use it, how to make it beneficial for the analyst, like really beneficial for the analyst. And so like my initial walk around the floor, seeing Gen AI this and AI this, and what was the one that was on the booth right next to us, John? It was AI native.
God, AI native.
What the hell was AI native?
I have no idea. I mean, I've seen cloud native, and cloud native makes sense until people started talking about like Kubernetes. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And, somebody just commented like focus on real problem solving. And, I don't want to pivot too hard, right? But I did see some. So Sysdig didn't have hey, we have Gen AI on the product. It's like we have a product for Gen AI. So like specific protections for Bedrock, Q, and SageMaker. I thought that was really cool.
What were they doing? Can you talk a little bit about what you saw that they were specifically doing? Because I didn't dive into their demo.
Yeah. So Sysdig, most people know them for the Falco project, right? Falco is an extended BPF sort of sensing that like grabs telemetry from containers, Kubernetes clusters, other orchestrators to monitor for either container specific attacks or just, things that pass over onto the Docker daemon or inside of like a Kubernetes namespace, for instance. And then Sysdig has their mainline product. Obviously it does a lot more than that now. They're more of like, what's considered like the modern CNAPP, right? So there's cloud security, there's some data security, there's, some compliance monitoring, but they had a, Falco, or not Falco, but a Sysdig for Gen AI, not having an LLM inside of the first party product. And we'll get to that. Why I think it's a bit annoying for some products to have it in there, because it's like, hey, if you're the first party source, you expect the operator, the analyst to like understand like what's bad, what counts as a detection and alert in your platform. Why do you need to like re-explain it? Now, some have like, hey, let's recommend a pivot or how to go further in the product. I think that's pretty cool. It's like a paired programmer, paired sort of advisor sort of thing. But from what I gathered, and I couldn't get up to the booth other than to talk to the person I was crushing on. I was like, hey. But yes, she's at Sysdig.
Gotcha,
RIP to me. Gotcha. Hey, I don't care. And she probably knew. So she got got out of there. I was like, oh, gotta go.
Nice.
She was the one that
that's
probably
the only reason that you're promoting the product is because you were
yes.
By the way, this was not a paid promotion by Sysdig. It was just
no. Sysdig doesn't pay us. Sysdig doesn't even, their reps won't even give me their number, which is not why I went to the conference. It's just, we struck up a conversation in addition. I probably shouldn't even be mentioning this. I'm going to get canceled now.
John.
I'm going to go back to LinkedIn
Matt
and be like,
over there taking notes about what he's got to edit out now.
And Matt Eberhard is like, oh, got to get rid of this guy. You can't be talking about none of that. I mean, look, I'm going to just keep it a stack,
that's good because like some of the conversations that I did have with people really did talk about like the controls around Gen AI. As a matter of fact, that I call it secret squirrel because that's how it was presented to me. It did not feel very secret squirrely type of meeting, but it was super cool. It was a group of CISOs, and I'm not going to say too much because like they did kind of make a big deal about it. But that's where I had my first real substantive conversation about what are we doing to actually secure the use of Gen AI. I think every CISO that was in that room knew it was here to stay. Businesses were going to run to use it. There was nothing any security person in the entire globe was ever going to do to stop it. And it's the cloud conversation, John, all over again. No idea how we get to a point where we can actually say that we're securing Gen AI.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of it is vaporware, though. I think one of the people on the cutting edge of it, and I hate to admit this because he's a Fed and a crayon-eating Marine, Walter Haydock, if you're out there, sup, buddy. He's like one that's like really vocal, at least, or what the LinkedIn algorithm likes, who's talking about like third-party risk, fourth-party risk, like controls on top of it. I think it's a multi-layered thing, right? It's like, how do you secure the cloud? We talked about that last episode, and it's like I don't know, there's like a million things to account for, right? Some folks are focused on the data because they're afraid of model poisoning. Some people are focused on sanitizing inputs. Some people are focused on governance around what you can ask, what the model could vend. Is it going to like create pornography? Is it going to create something crazy, right? Some people are focused on, the actual usage. Does it retain data? Where does the data go? The sovereignty, the lifecycle management, or, even like the tenant isolation, right? Like if I ask my chat GPT session, is it going to start to bleed out other information? Is it going to retain what I give it as training data, right? If somebody gives it a snippet from their internal code base, and it was happening early on, it still continues to happen. And obviously the leadership team over there is, going to be kind of mum on it because they don't really know. And I think there's a ton of approaches to it. And what'll end up happening is there will be a couple security companies who will get really good at some part of that, like, software supply chain for AI. But I think everybody needs to take a step back and remember like what it is, like what an LLM is, right? A large language model. It's just a function of natural language processing, NLP. And NLP in the machine learning, neural networking space has been around for a really long time. I mean, AI in its various forms, like all AI is, right? Artificial intelligence. It's like, can it mimic human capability in some domain, some facet?
A really fast binary number generator.
Right. And even then it's really bad. There's no real intelligence to it. That's why it's artificial. It's it's a simulacrum. It's an imposter, and it shows itself with math, right? With absolutes, right? Like, you can't, freaking Lucky Palmer and those dudes at Anduril have figured out how to, do targeting and, intercepts on missiles, right? Using AI. But it's at its core, it's a wrapper on top of something more, kind of banal, right? NLP, it's boring, right? It's really good right now at summarizing a lot of data. I think there are some folks out there who have really high quality FMs that are fine-tuned that you could prompt out
what's an
really
FM?
nicely.
What's an FM?
A foundational model, think something like GPT-3 is a foundational model. OpenAI just happens to be the company. Amazon Bedrock has various things. Titan, Meta, Facebook have Llama. And then there's even other open source ones. I think XGrok or whatever XAI is from X from Elon's thing.
Yeah, XAI.
I think it's XGrok and XAI is a company, but it's it's not a wonder worker, and that's why I get scared when I see things like, hey, a Omni paired programmer. I use GitHub's Copilot for Electric Eye. Electric Eye is my SPM. It's a CSPM tool, cloud security posture management. It's open source, Apache 2 license, support for AWS, ServiceNow, Salesforce Cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, GCP, Azure. If I ever get around to finishing that, it has a bunch of different outputs and whatnot. Free to use, and I use Copilot for it because the way that I write my checks, they're templated. They use Python decorators. It uses the AWS security finding format, and then it translates it to OCSF and other formats as well. So for a repeatable thing that it has a ton of data on, it's really good. But if I ask it like, hey, help me port this, Pandas script into PySpark, and then instead of pointing it at an AWS glue table backed by S3, I want this to go to Databricks instead, it's not so good at that. And I think that's where there's a detriment. And I think that's where a lot of, there's going to be more innovation around it and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's still, you're limited by the amount of tokens it could ingest, what context it has. It's just not the freaking, magic that it is. Yeah. And that's what made me a little angry, where I'm turning around, I'm seeing like, wait a second, 2 years ago, you're in a freaking, ASPM tool. 2 years before that, you're a SaaS tool. Now you're an AI tool. Mm-hmm. You guys were a CASB, then you pivoted to ZTNA, then you pivoted to SACE, and now you're an AI company. You guys are AI native, and I have your sensor on my computer. Like, there's a bunch of... Yeah, I know. It's like, look, at the end of the day, we know how it is. The marketers need to... for the demand gen engine, or to get qualified leads, or to get brand awareness, there's certain things you have to do and liberties you have to take as a marketer. Completely understand that, sympathize with that. But as an operator, as a security buyer, security seller, somebody who's been in mid management, high management, it's like,
it makes for so much noise, especially when you walk around the floor of any conference, let alone one that's focused heavily on security. And I think that a lot of the there's a lot of noise, and I see it with every conference. I think this is where my cynicism comes in with every conference, and this one was no difference, right? I mean, I think that it's great to hear AWS's innovation. I genuinely felt during this conference that AWS wants to be more in the security space, and they want to enable more security function for the people that use AWS Cloud. But then you get these companies that build stuff on top of it, and it's just garbage. Like, a lot of it is just garbage.
It's, it is what it is. I mean, to I guess put the wrapper on it. Look, as I think it's really hard. Like, if you're coming in, to cyber right now, or you're an outside observer, or like you want to do your own market research, maybe like, you're a SOC manager, you're new in management. I think that's where right now is would be super annoying if you don't have a ton of field exposure and not have seen a ton of tools where you could just Google something, and then now you're getting everybody recommended for everything, right? Because everybody almost does everything. Yes. Because there's just so much, venture capital and private equity money out there. People are able to ramp their teams, and now it becomes a function of, okay, I don't care so much about capability. It's like, who's cheaper, right? But with this AI stuff, it really muddies the water. There's definitely a FOMO, if you're a missing out element to it. But overall, AWS, I feel, and I'm not trying to be overly oh, AWS. I think they did a good job of it, right? I didn't hear, anything like, oh, Amazon Q is going to fix everything, and Amazon Code Catalyst is going to write all your code. We're 50 million times more tokens than GitHub Copilot. I didn't hear any of that. Yeah. I didn't hear anybody say AI native, besides a couple other folks, right? And I think who had the most grounded release out of all the conferences that I listened to and watched and read about, in preparation for this cast, was actually Cribble. At CribbleCon, they announced Cribble Copilot. And in the launch blog, they're like, this isn't going to replace your data engineers. This isn't going to replace your data analysts. This isn't going to be perfect all the freaking time about every little thing. That, hey, this is good to do some exploratory data analysis, kind of paired programming, good to recommend how to normalize certain fields with Cribble packs. how to, maybe even write like a Cribble search or a KQL or a SQL query back to the original data, maybe to create a view to pull off of instead. So I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't notice anything else at CribbleConf, and I'm just going to run through a couple of these other ones if you don't mind, Neal.
Yeah, go for
give it back to you.
Yeah, do it.
Snowflake, they didn't have a conference, but they had announcements last week.
Yeah.
They have general availability of Iceberg.
You mean outside of the breach?
Well, yeah, I mean, besides the breach, which right now everybody's pointing, between them, their security port codes, the actual users, and some other folks, I guess, who are helping with the external investigation, security researchers, everybody's pointing the finger at everybody.
Yeah.
Which is kind of,
par for the course.
Yeah, about par for the course, when you see a public thing like this. I mean, look, at the end of the day, hundreds of companies got impacted. A lot of operators lost sleep, came off of PTO to try to figure out what's going on. You could check it today. Like if you're a Snowflake user, there is a specific information schema database or schema, right? Like that mid-level container that has a users table. And within the users table, look for is secondary authentication or has secondary authentication, true or false. Check if they have passkeys. Just go ahead, rotate the passwords if you can, eliminate users that aren't being used, right? Like just normal security hygiene thing. Because at the end of the day, once you get past all the crazy marketing hype, Snowflake's a data warehouse.
Yep.
Right. But they have general availability of the Iceberg tables, which came out of public preview last year. And Apache Iceberg is a type of open table format that, is just kind of a rehash of metadata usage on top of Apache Parquet, which is a pretty, familiar columnar binary data store for data lakes and data lake houses. I wrote 2 blogs on Iceberg. Maybe we could link that and whatnot, but I don't want to get right into it on open table formats. We'll be here all day. Snowflake talked about the Polaris catalog. So a catalog is a metadata store, and it stores metadata about tables. It's what allows you to access files stored in a bucket or in an index as if it were a real database. Like that's kind of the magic behind a lakehouse. So they released Polaris, which will have, kind of interoperability using the Apache Xtable project, which is incubating with the Apache software format, which allows interoperability of open table formats. Our data counterparts focus a lot more on interoperability than we do in security. In security, it's fiefdoms. Not that there aren't silos and issues over there, but that's one thing
don't
that
you
I
insult,
like.
Don't you insult my ownership that way?
Yeah, sorry. And then data clean rooms for what I would assume are, kind of sensitive M&A/DD, lawyerly type things on the Snowflake data intelligence platform, and granular access to tables are now generally available, and a bunch of other stuff. But I think those are the cool ones to talk about. On Databricks, for SQL warehouses, which I like, materialized views and streaming tables are in public preview before you'd have to use Spark. So materialized view, a view is a logical lookup against the physical table, but a view is also good for you to combine between 2 tables or take a sampling of data, change data, right? Like you get a Unix timestamp that's technically a big int. It's just an integer. You can't do anything with that with epic seconds, right? And then with a view, you could change it to like a proper timestamp so you could use predicates and whatnot. And then the materialized view takes heavy operations and functions that are done in SQL and essentially like pre-configures or pre-compiles them, so it's a little bit faster. So if you running an analytical workload, or you're doing a ton of joins, a ton of pre-processing, a map view is good for that. Now you can use it in the SQL warehouse. And then a streaming table is exactly what it sounds like. It uses the streaming capabilities built into the Databricks platform with Unity Catalog, which is their commercial version of Delta Lake, which is another open table format. We're going to have to talk about that at some point, but just Google it. Apache Xtable support, and then they bought Tabular. Tabular is kind of like a commercialized Iceberg, and some of the folks at Tabular created Apache Iceberg, and everybody was afraid that, oh my God, Databricks is going to shut down all the tables and keep them to themselves. They have 2 of the 3 now. They're going to buy one house and take Apache Hoodie, and nobody's going to have a table. That's all BS. It's FUD. And then others of note, SplunkConf, they had we had a partnership announcement with them, right? That our app at the people who employ us is in Splunk Cloud Classic and Victoria. And Data Strato is a catalog company. Their product Gravitino, which is an open source Omni catalog that could sit on top of a ton of storage, has donated it to the Apache Software Foundation. And Gravitino is now in incubation. Shout out to Lisa and all the folks over there at Data Strato. They're building the data stratosphere for interoperability, and it's something I'm nerding out on, doing a little bit of R&D on.
You nerding out? So I never would have guessed.
I know. So yeah, that was a quick run through, and anybody who logged in, this isn't a security freaking stream anymore. What the hell is this guy talking about?
No, this is Sec Data Ops. This is exactly why we're doing it.
We're doing the data part, right?
That's right.
So what did you think? I just listed off everybody else's. It's been crazy this week, and we're still not over, right? Like Forward CloudSec's next week. In July, you got the New York City AWS Summit, then Black Hat's coming up. There's so many things that are coming up.
Yeah, it's conference season, and I think you highlighted listen, all of these folks, when you talk about Snowflake is trying to build a security apparatus because they realize that, listen, the reason that we brought Sec Data Ops to Twitch and to YouTube, you brought it to LinkedIn, is because there is a clear, identifiable need to move away from some of these very archaic and ancient thought processes around centralized data storage. Namely SIMs. I'm not saying that SIMs will ever go away, and I know that was a conversation that we had, I think it was last week or the week before, right? But I think that we're seeing so much data, and when you talk about having Gen AI and the amount of data that you absolutely need to make Gen AI work, you're not going to be able to fiscally analyze all of that data for security reasons inside of a SIM. And so you've got Snowflake getting in the security business. You got Databricks getting in the security business, right? You've got, you got AWS getting in the security business more and more with Security Lake and being partners on OCSF. And so I think I think what you just highlighted is exactly the reason why we do this stream, is to bring the awareness that hey, a lot of you guys in chat, a lot of you guys who are watching this, we're commonly thought to think about things like SIMs and Splunks and Elastics and EDRs. And there is an EDR question that I did pick up out of chat that I do want to push for you because I think you'd really enjoy it. And I think that we're seeing an extension of that into the data realm, hence your ship post on Sec Data Ops that has now taken fold. And so I think you articulated that well. I think what I would say is I was pleasantly surprised. My biggest takeaway was pleasantly surprised to be sitting around a room of my peers, hearing us all talk about the things that we actually wanted out of AI that were substantive and meaningful, right? It was a huge consensus that we want AI to help analysts make decisions faster, right? Whether it's for pen testing, whether it's for vulnerability management, whether it's for SOC and a blue team, whether it's for threat hunting, malware engineering, it didn't matter. We want Gen AI to help us make decisions faster. And it was so nice to actually hear that and to hear substantive conversation on that. I think I also heard that there was a massive concern around data being used in models. And the things that I heard were actually meaningful concerns. I had heard that law teams now for certain sectors of the of the verticals were now saying that hey, you need to do this entire third-party risk mechanism if you have AI in your name, so that we understand where the data is going, how you're using the data in your modeling, what's it being used for in your security apparatus. And so that was really great to hear. The code thing you'd mentioned using Copilot. We heard about Cribble launching their Copilot. I think we're seeing more and more of this use of Gen AI to make life more efficient. And specifically, we're seeing it. We talked extensively about how it seems to be an easy use case for developers to use it for their development needs. And that seems to be significant. We had an individual who was representative of a company who specializes in code security talk about how they were using Gen AI to help them make stronger, secure coding decisions, in their own product. And so I think that I was glad to hear substantive conversations around the usefulness of Gen AI, and that made me really happy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, not to sound too optimistic, that we're on the right path. I feel like once we get past this this first batch of people just rush in and get one out there. Because look, at the end of the day, the market, obviously has a demand of some sort for it.
Yeah.
And there are definitely, good things about it, right? It's not like, hey, I don't take the approach of like that it's absolutely useless. Like I said, I use GPT-4 a lot. I have a GPT Pro plan I've had for, since the beginning of this year because it is helpful at discerning. But, I'm not like totally a dummy, right? I know how to write a little bit of code and I know how to troubleshoot. So for somebody like me or for a little bit of exposure, I think that's where it becomes even more powerful because they're like, all right, now if I get an issue because this thing is just reflecting the training data it has, and the training data is like mostly just dirty stuff it pulls off of Reddit and wherever else it got it from, they could work through it. Copilot's good if you're just coding in like either a well-established framework, well-established language, or if in your own project. The summarization part of LLMs is really, really good. And I mean, just think about GPT-3 and how it took, kind of went viral and took everything by storm and how bad it was, when you actually got into it. And then 3.5, 3.5 Turbo, 4 for O. They've been talking about 5 forever. But now I think, things like Llama 2, to a certain extent, and even the new Anthropic models like Claude 3, Haiku, and Sonnet that we turned on in Bedrock recently and are playing with are, really, really good, right? So I think that everybody's kind of learning still, like, right? Once you get past like the theoretical physicists and the people with theoretical degrees in physics and the AI scientists and folks like that, who have valid concerns, right? About like, hey, where's this going to lead us? That folks are learning how to harness it better, and it's making security operators, data engineers, DevOps, SREs, a lot of people's lives a lot easier.
Yeah.
I saw the question about, the Defender the Falcon.
Before you answer that one, I do want to push this one up because I did see this one. I thought this one was spot on. There is a replacement. There is a better way. If we have time, John and I can talk about it. But I do want to hit the Defender question. But there is a way. There is 1,000% a different way. So here's the question from Cybertooth. I know this person. This is Residual. He's pretty solid. He's had some struggles with this for a while. What are your thoughts on CrowdStrike Falcon for Defender? Do you think Microsoft will back off on Defender development and rely on CrowdStrike?
No, so my thoughts is that it was pretty funny.
This one because I got you on this one.
Yeah, big meme energy from CrowdStrike. Shout out to CrowdStrike. Please give me a log scale tenant for free, and give me one of George's Lambos while you're at it. Thank you. Thanks for not sending your lawyers to kill me with query open pipeline.
I did add that to the bot command, so we can talk about that after you answer this question. But we can talk about that.
Cool. Yeah. So. My thoughts are first, awesome meme, super funny. Two, that look, there's a reason why they developed this. Like, there's people who are Defender users who might be transitioning to Falcon. Maybe they only had Defender plans. I think you're most likely going to see that from like independent Defender users or folks whose grandfathered Defender ATP, remember when it used to be called that, is probably expiring, or Microsoft's putting pressure on them. So
I still call it Defender ATP.
Yeah, I still call it Defender ATP as well, or just ATP in general.
I also still do EOP, right? Exchange Online Protection as well.
Yeah. I don't know. So, or O365, or Exchange, or SPO, SharePoint Online. Like, I still use some of these. So I do think that it's a cool product for transition. It's a bit of a meme, it's a bit of, sand in the eye. But I don't think Microsoft will back off of it because it's been in the Microsoft security business for a long time. It started as just regular old Windows Defender, Defender ATP, Advanced Threat Protection, and then now it's MDE. They've made a ton of investments in the Defender ecosystem, and they've expanded it to high high value SKUs for Defender Plan 1, Plan 2. Defender XDR is kind of an incentive to get people over to Microsoft Sentinel using a log analytics workspace to put those tables that were only under advanced hunting queries. Now you have access to them longer term, and you could hit them with KQL and do a lot of things over there in logs. So I don't think they'll back off of it. I still think that if you're a full Microsoft shop, there's really no better alternative, especially since it's so well integrated to other systems. And that's what CrowdStrike is ultimately going to have an issue with. Like, yeah, they have a lot of cool kit. They got Spotlight vulnerability. They have the thing that they bought from Talon, I believe, which was an ASPM tool or something like that. So there's cool stuff that CrowdStrike is doing. But yeah, as like an overall replacement, I don't see it. If I'm a full Microsoft M365 user, there ain't no way. Defender, is just way cheaper because you don't pay for the Defender endpoints, right? Like we had M365 E5 at Lightspin when I was a CISO there. And yeah, it was expensive per seat, but the protection you get and the fact that I could additionally put those MDE sensors on hundreds of EC2 instances that we had as our Kubernetes nodes was, perfect. And yeah, is it painful to run on Linux? Is it painful to run on a cloud outside of Defender? Do you lose a lot of context if you're not a Defender XDR Sentinel user, or not an advanced hunter, or not a KQL expert? Hell yeah. I heard there's a product that can help you with that, though. I forget what it was called.
I think what you're really getting to, though, is the heart of the matter, which is right. Defender and just Microsoft as a company has chosen a route of saying we're okay being 70% good enough with Defender because it's on everything. And so there's a lot of bean counters that will look at that and say, well, I'm already paying you a buttload of money, Microsoft, to be everywhere for E5 licensing and to be in my data centers, and I've got Azure and I'm doing all my projects and my development and everything inside of Azure and things like that. So 70% is good enough for security. And I think you get somebody like CrowdStrike who comes along and says, well, to your point, we can kick a little sand in that eye and be a little relevant in that, but I don't see Microsoft, slowing down development or stopping trying to push that at all by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and sorry too, if I had a good follow-up. Defender for server, yeah, I'm tracking. So the Azure Defender stuff is a little bit different. Like Defender I'm talking about like M365 E5 here. I'm not talking about like independent Azure where it's like, hey, they do have Defender for server, they have Defender for APIs, Defender for databases, Defender for Cosmos, Defender for cloud. You do have to pay for those, and that's annoying to me. Like my AWS, I think, has the proper model here where it's affordable, like just turning on guard duty everywhere, turn on inspector everywhere, turn on SSM, or at least make sure you have the agent. All that stuff is inexpensive or just straight up free, right? Like Security Hub and whatnot. Like it's not like, oh, if you want to turn Security Hub on, you need to subscribe to enterprise support, right? Trusted Advisor and Health were like that back in the day. They kind of still are, but now you could get that telemetry out. So yeah, I mean, from that aspect, like if I'm an Azure user, well, first off, I'm not.
If I'm an Azure user, I need an MRI for a brain scan.
Yeah, I'm in deep shit if I'm an Azure. If I'm a big Azure shop, like I would honestly use friggin' CrowdStrike. Unless like DLP and all the extra controls of Defender for cloud and whatnot are important to you. But that's neither here nor there.
All right, real quick, John, we're coming up to the top of the hour. We're at the top of the hour. There's a couple things I want to hit really fast.
Yes.
Go Time says, I'm new to cybersecurity. Is this a good channel for beginners to struggle back with low-level knowledge? Yes, absolutely, 1,000%. Today is Sec Data Ops Day, so we dive a little deeper. We've got John here to cover, as you can tell, a lot of deep dive topics on cloud security and data, the emergence of kind of security and data together. So this is still a great channel. Obviously, today is the Art of the Possible Day where we dive deep into a lot of these concepts. So you are in the right place, and thank you for tuning in. And if you want to, tune in tomorrow for our AMA in the morning where we just sit down and BS for a while. John?
Yeah, can't confirm.
This one,
Neal, yeah.
this one came through John. I think it's for both of us. Cybertooth asked, "Hey John, how do you balance your professional development with the needs of the company?" And then Carly says, question for Neal along the similar lines: how do you have time for golf? Isn't cyber the most demanding 24/7 field in IT? So John, let's kind of talk about work-life balance for these two individuals really, really fast, because I do think it's super important. How do you balance?
I always try to work at places I'm going to learn something new, so I get the pro development kind of for free. I never targeted it, right? Like some people do, but I've never sought career advice. I don't read business books. I don't do anything like that. Anytime I go to a different company, it's okay, obviously pay raises, roles, whatnot, but what can I learn there?
You
what
hear that,
projects
Chad? Every time I go to a new company, pay raise.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's why I do this, right? I'm in it to get paid, to provide for my girls. I want Chad to hear that. I want Chad to hear that, because there is a stigma that cybersecurity people hear, and they're like, no, how dare you do it for the money, John? Say it loud and clear for the people in the back. Hell no, bro. I don't do this shit for free, man. I work my ass off. I'm here to get paid. I work for startups to get big exits, to, make everybody here get paid. If you do your part, not only you, but all your coworkers will become multimillionaires too. And, I grew up in the Bronx, bro. My parents did a good job providing for us, but I'm trying to provide even more for the community, for the church, for all the other folks out there too, right? So that's what I do it for. And yeah, I mean, if you go to a new place, you should balance it with what can I learn here? Can I be impactful? Is it going to be a cultural, kind of mishmash? And you can tell during interviewing, if you ask specific questions, and they're like, oh, PTO, oh, what do you mean you're going to be pregnant soon? What do you mean you want to take leave? Uppercut that person. You have my permission. You don't have the government's permission, but you have John's permission to uppercut that person. Just crush them immediately. Especially if you're a woman, right? It's oh, I'm pregnant. It's oh, wait a second. Why are you pregnant? It's douche. Hit him. Crush him. And then work-life balance. It's look, I'm bad at that. I think everybody is to a certain extent.
We're right? All bad at that. That's why we're here.
Where it's sometimes you just stay too long. Right. It's just setting alarms even, or just having a mental cue, or just a scheduled, or it's get the hell up and go do something fun. Yeah. I think everybody's limit is different. Some people are more than happy to just stay and kind of churn and code and whatnot. It's hard to answer the question, because it's I don't know what pro dev is to some people. I don't know what work-life balance is to some people. Yeah. To some folks, they're good with getting 14 days to go to Tenerife and get blackout drunk and then come back and get back to it. For some people, it's hey, I want to get to my leisure activities. I mean, look, it's hard for that too, because it's my parenting comes first to the girls, right? It's just me out here, and I have other stuff to do. So that's really all I care about, right? And everything else is kind of secondary to it. And if I'm not in an environment that could support that, like a job, then I'm not going to work there. Yep. Simple as.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Right, for me, working is hard. I mean, that's why they call it work and not fun, right? Working is hard.
Right.
Choosing to pick a role at a startup was volunteering myself for servitude, right? I mean, it is twice as hard to work at a startup. I mean, you heard John say that Dave this last week wears multiple hats. He wore multiple hats this week, right? We had 4 people at Reinforce this week. 1, 2, 3, 4. We had 5 people. Sorry, we had 5 people at Reinforce this week. That's
5 at Clayton.
Yeah. That's 20. What's that? That's 1/25 of the company, whatever that works out to be. 20. No, I forget what that. 20%. That's 20% of the company.
Yeah.
Right.
Most of the executive team.
Yeah. Most of the executive team was there at Reinforce, and so there's 50 hats that we wear, but I think that there's to the work-life balance question, I set time for myself, right? And for the golf thing explicitly, right? There's a lot of, Neal, how do you have time for golf? And, it's different, because I want everybody to understand that my journey with golf is about being a professional, right? And so it's at some point in time, I'm going to turn golf into my career. And so that requires a different level of dedication. It requires almost like going back to college and getting a degree level of dedication to do it. And there's an understanding to John talked about having priorities with his family and making time for his kids and making sure that he's there for them and being able to provide for them. Our family here understands that this is the next chapter of my life, as being a professional golfer. And so there are sacrifices that we make not just for work, to be here for work and to push work into a direction, but also there are sacrifices that I need to make in my morning time to go to the gym, in my evening time to go to my different practices, on my weekends to go do practice rounds or to go see my coach or to go see a physical therapist. And those are just sacrifices that we know that we need to make, because I think I had somebody tell me one time, don't make don't make short-term decisions for long-term gains, right? Don't worry about the sacrifices that you make now if they're going to benefit you in the longer run. And so I would say, like, prioritize what's important to you. Like, that's really what it boils down to, is prioritize what's important to you. Give it your all when you're out there. Like, if you're at a startup or you're at a company or you're trying to go pursue a new career, you're coming into cybersecurity for the first time, whatever the case is, like, prioritize what's important to you and go all out on it.
No, 100%. I do want to jump into that last bit, though. Isn't cyber the most demanding? I mean, I think that's a myth, right?
Yes.
Like, I don't think it's all that demanding. Like, I've been a startup CISO. I've been, running security for a massive organization of 50,000 people. And I'm, the point guy for all the cloud and OffSec. I still had time, right? Like, yeah, is it stressful? Hell yeah. But the 24/7 thing, I think that's really more of it's a myth. It's like an olden times thing.
We do it to ourselves.
It's mostly self-perpetuating, yes. But I also think it points to like bad process, right? Where if you're working your people to the bone, you keep feeding them signals, yes. And whatnot.
Yes.
That's where it turns into a slog, and you should leave, right? Like, yes. Look, I know the economy's trash, even though we're not supposed to say that. Shit's expensive. A freaking gallon of milk, a gallon of gas is the highest it's ever been. And, you could ascribe that to any reason, but it is what it is. And I don't really give a shit about the geopolitical and the economic factors behind it. Well, I do, but I don't care to neuter the speech around it. Like, oh, you can't say that because it has implications. Implicate these hands, bro. I'll implicate you.
John.
Yeah. I'm getting started, but to this last question, and then we're gonna dip, or at least I'm gonna dip because my lunch is like an hour old now, and I'm gonna get salmonella. Time to market, development, organization, security, best practices, counterintuitive? Not at all. They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Especially as a security company. As a security company, you can't afford to have bad security.
That is 100%.
All eyes are on
true.
You.
Yeah.
Attackers, independent researchers, ethical hackers through bug crowd and whatnot. Like, everybody's on you because the security companies typically pay out the biggest bug bounties. They have bug bounty and VDP program, or VDPs. ATM machine, whatever, right? A vulnerability disclosure program, but a VDP is kind of a catch-all in some places. So no, I mean, here, absolutely not. And we have a really good cadre of developers as well who've worked at security companies or who've just been around and understand secure practices, right? Because it's what we do, sanitizing input and whatnot. Like, that's part of search. So, and that's just one of, hundreds of AppSec best practices. At other places, yeah, it can happen, right? Where you have a chief product officer or a business demand, and it's like, get it out. Sometimes you prefer that. And even if you do get it out and it's bad, it doesn't have any noticeable impact. I forget who it was. I forget her name, but she's also a shit poster. She used to work at Trace 8, I believe. You know who I'm talking about, short lady, shortcut blonde hair, Kelly Shortridge, I think, maybe. I forget. I think you're right. But she did some research on it, like, hey, for like huge freaking, breaches, like what happens to the stock price?
Yeah.
It doesn't. Look at all the big boards who have management risk committees. Not a lot of them have a bunch of dedicated stuff. Like, risk is looked at holistically, and cybersecurity risk that folks in cyber think is the biggest deal. It ain't, bro. It's more of a risk if the country that you're freaking manufacturing or your development capacity is in goes into a revolt. That's real business risk, right? Like, oh, MFA on the users. Oh God, Sony's still around. Humana's still around. Right? Like, all these big companies are still around that had horrible breaches. Yeah. The government doesn't get fired when their shit gets breached, and right? So
listen, like, chat, evaluate yourself. How many companies do you still have, technology for or accounts with who have ever been part of a breach? Like, it's, we've talked about that before several times. All right, John, with that, Dave Wheeler's going to sign us off on LinkedIn. Work-life quality over work-life balance. I love it. It's a great quote from Dave. I appreciate him.
The man,
Jon,
Mr. Wheels.
Thank you so much for hanging out. Virtual high five through the camera. I appreciate it. It's good to see you, even though I saw you several times this week already.
Yeah, I know.
Tune in.
Yeah, like
2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, I don't know what we're going to talk. Oh, we're going to talk about OCSF in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, we'll talk about OCSF and some like foundational data stuff. I'll be around, like my PTO, again, work-life quality. I'll be off, but I'll be around. So
nice. For those who are interested in the CrowdStrike stuff, we did release an open source project. You can hit !FDR inside a Twitch chat, and you can get access to the GitHub repo that Jon's talking about. It's free. We open source that for the entire community. It's basically a way to move Falcon Data Replicator from their S3 into an S3 bucket inside Amazon. We won't get into like why we did that, but we saw a need from the community that they could benefit from having that. And so, Jon, kudos to you for writing that. Jon wrote that, many open nights to write that, and I appreciate that as query CISO. Thank you for writing that for me so that I can get my CrowdStrike data into S3. I appreciate it, but everyone else out there, hopefully you can benefit from it too.
I did write it off of our data. So yeah, I mean, I hope CrowdStrike could benefit from it and everybody else. And we need community help, right? We need people opening up issues to give us de-identified logs so I could write more normalizers. We only cover 1/10 of what's available because of our license and because of the type of devices and whatnot that we run. So thanks for the shout out, Neal. I didn't do it on my own. I had a lot of support from you, from Brian, and from a lot of other folks here internally who've tried it before. So, but thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll see everybody in 2 weeks. And listen, for my regular cyber and security folks, we'll be on tomorrow morning really quickly because Dave Wheeler made a meeting for me. But I promised you that I'd be on this week to do our Friday morning AMA. So tune in tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll do an AMA. Until we see you next time, stay awesome and stay dangerous.
Stay dangerous. Hell yeah. See ya.